The eclipse of the heart. Allison and Mark, a young couple deeply in love, had set out on a weekend hike through the picturesque woods surrounding their small town. They had heard tales of the dark forest and the sinister shadow people, but dismissed them as mere legends. They were confident in their ability to navigate the trails and enjoy their time together, unaware of the darkness that awaited them. As the day wore on, the couple found themselves lost in the labyrinthine woods, the once familiar trails twisted and unrecognizable. Desperation set in as they wandered aimlessly, their love for each other the only thing keeping them from succumbing to despair. As twilight descended, they stumbled upon a decrepit cabin, half hidden by overgrown vines and gnarled trees. Desperate for shelter and a brief respite from their ordeal, they pried open the rotting door and stepped inside. The cabin was dank and musty, seemingly abandoned for decades. In the dim light, they discovered a diary resting on a dusty table. The pages were yellowed and brittle, filled with the frantic scribblings of the cabin's previous occupants. As Allison and Mark read the harrowing entries, they learned the terrifying fate that had befallen those who had sought refuge in the cabin before them. The diary recounted a chilling tale of the shadow people, malevolent beings that fed on fear and despair. Drawn to the isolated cabin and its terrified inhabitants, the entries grew more frantic as the previous occupants described the encroaching darkness, the whispers that echoed through the night, and the creeping shadows that seemed to come alive. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Allison and Mark realized with horror that they were not alone. The darkness outside began to seep through the cabin's cracked windows and warped walls, and the whispers of the shadow people filled the air, growing louder with each passing moment. Terrified, the couple clung to each other, their love the only thing standing between them and the relentless darkness. They knew that the shadow people sought to tear them apart, to steal their love and their lives and trap them in the same nightmarish limbo as the cabin's previous occupants. As the shadows closed in, Allison and Mark made a desperate plan. They would use their love as a weapon against the darkness, a beacon of light to drive away the sinister beings that sought to consume them. With trembling hands, they lit a fire in the hearth, the flickering flames casting an eerie glow across the cabin. The couple clutched each other tightly, their love burning brighter than the fire that crackled before them. They whispered words of devotion, and as they did, the darkness seemed to falter, the whispers growing fainter, the shadows receding. As the night wore on, Allison and Mark held onto each other, their love a fortress against the encroaching darkness. When the first light of dawn broke through the trees, the shadow people retreated, unable to withstand the power of their love. Exhausted and battered, the couple emerged from the cabin, their love stronger than ever. They made their way out of the dark forest hand in hand, forever changed by their harrowing ordeal. The cabin and the diary remained, a chilling reminder of the darkness that dwelled within the forest, and the power of love to conquer even the most sinister of beings. The forest's last breath. 4 generations, the shadow people had haunted the dark forest, preying on the fears and souls of those who dared to venture within its twisted depths. As the tales of the malevolent beings grew more horrifying, a group of fearless hunters, led by the skilled and cunning Nathaniel, vowed to eradicate the shadows once and for all. Armed with an arsenal of weapons and ancient spells, the hunters set out into the heart of the dark forest. As they ventured deeper, the air grew colder, and the shadows seemed to dance and twist around them, as if taunting their futile efforts undeterred. The hunters pressed on, determined to rid the world of the sinister presence that dwelled within the woods. As they confronted the shadows, the very forest itself seemed to turn against them. The gnarled trees came alive, their branches and roots closing in like a suffocating embrace. The ground trembled beneath their feet as if the forest was attempting to swallow them whole. The hunters fought back, their weapons and spells carving a path through the relentless darkness. But as they battled the shadows, they began to discover a terrible truth. The shadow people were not just a part of the forest, but its very life force. The darkness that sustained the twisted woods, the fate of the dark forest was irrevocably intertwined with their own, and as they fought to vanquish the shadows, they were unwittingly sealing their own doom. The realization struck Nathaniel like a cold wind, chilling him to the bone. If they were to destroy the shadow people, they would also destroy the dark forest, a place that had existed long before their ancestors had even set foot in the land. The hunters were faced with an impossible choice: allow the shadows to continue their reign of terror, or sacrifice the ancient forest and its untold secrets to rid the world of the darkness. As the hunters stood in the heart of the forest, the shadows closed in around them, sensing their hesitation. Nathaniel knew that they could not allow the shadow people to continue their malevolent existence, but the thought of destroying the forest weighed heavily in his conscience. In a final act of desperation, Nathaniel led his hunters in a powerful incantation. a spell that would bind the shadow people to the heart of the dark forest, forever trapping them within its depths. As they chanted the ancient words, a wave of energy pulsed through the woods. With the spell complete, the hunters retreated from the dark forest, leaving the shadows bound and contained within its heart. The price of their victory was high, as they knew that the forest would never be the same, its essence forever tainted by the darkness. As the years passed, the tales of the shadow people and the dark forest became little more than whispered legends, a cautionary tale of the darkness that lurked within the hearts of men. And as the forest stood, silent and brooding, the hunters knew that they had not truly vanquished the shadows, but merely locked them away. A dark secret hidden within the woods, its fate forever intertwined with their own. The Hollow Faces. Richard Danvers, a seasoned journalist with a penchant for the unexplained, had heard the whispers of the shadow people and the haunting tales of dark forest. In search of answers, he decided to venture into the woods and expose the truth behind the myth, helping to reveal it as nothing more than a tall tale spun by overactive imaginations. Armed with a camera, a tape recorder, and a steely resolve, Richard set out on a crisp autumn day. As he ventured deeper into the forest, he couldn't help but notice the gnarled trees that seemed to twist and writhe in the fading sunlight. Despite the beauty of the forest, an uneasy feeling settled in his chest, as if the woods were hiding a terrible secret. The further Richard went, the more he was haunted by hollow faces, seemingly etched into the trees. Each face appeared contorted in pain and fear, their eyes devoid of life. At first, he thought it was merely a trick of the light, but as he continued, the faces became more pronounced and chillingly lifelike. Unnerved, but determined to uncover the truth, Richard began to document the faces, snapping photographs and recording his observations. As the sun dipped below the horizon, he noticed that the faces seemed to shift and change, as if the trees themselves were trying to communicate a terrible truth. As Richard studied the faces more closely, he made a horrifying discovery. The faces belonged to the souls of those who had been consumed by the forest's shadowy inhabitants, the victims of the shadow people. They were forever trapped in a nightmarish limbo, their pain and fear etched into the very fabric of the woods. The deeper he went, the more faces he found, some old and weathered, others new and fresh, as if their torment had only just begun. The air grew colder and more oppressive, and the shadows seemed to grow longer, reaching out to him with sinister intent. As Richard attempted to leave the forest, he found himself lost among the twisted trees and hollow faces. The shadows closed in around him, whispering threats and taunts, as if they were aware of his quest to expose their dark secret. Terrified, Richard frantically searched for an escape, desperate to avoid the same fate as those trapped within the hollow faces. As the night waned, the whispers grew louder and the faces more animated, their expressions twisting in agony. Just as Richard was about to succumb to the darkness, he stumbled upon a small sunlit clearing with the last of his strength. He sprinted towards the light, narrowly escaping the clutches of the shadow people. When Richard emerged from the forest, he was a changed man. The terror of his experience was etched into his own face, and he could not bring himself to share the truth of what he had discovered. The photographs he had taken remained locked away, the horrifying secrets of dark forest hidden from the world. But Richard could never forget the hollow faces, the tortured souls forever etched in his memory. The nightmares plagued him, and he knew that the forest's shadowy inhabitants still lurked in the darkness, waiting for the next unwitting victim to venture into their sinister domain. The Shadow's Lullaby. Maria had always been a light sleeper, but ever since the birth of her daughter, Lily, she was plagued by nightmares of the shadow people. The sinister beings haunted her dreams, their whispers echoing through the dark corners of her mind. Maria feared for her daughter's safety, dreading the day the shadows would come for her, the innocent child. One evening, as she tucked Lily into bed, Maria noticed her daughter humming a haunting tune. The lullaby was unlike any she had ever heard, its melody echoing the whispers that haunted her dreams. With a sinking feeling, Maria realized that the shadow people had found her daughter, the lullaby a chilling harbinger of the darkness that threatened to consume them both. Desperate to save her child, Maria sought the advice of an elderly woman known for her knowledge of the supernatural. The woman, a wizened figure with piercing eyes, revealed the terrifying truth. The lullaby was a siren song of the shadow people who were attempting to lure Lily into the heart of the dark forest. The old woman offered Maria a glimmer of hope, a ritual that could break the shadow people's hold on her daughter. But to perform the ritual, Maria would have to venture into the depths of the dark forest, a journey fraught with danger and despair. Determined to protect her daughter, Maria steeled herself for the harrowing ordeal ahead. As she entered the forest, the air grew colder, and the shadows seemed to lengthen and twist around her. The whispers of the shadow people taunted her, their voices echoing through the trees like a sinister chorus. But Maria pressed on, her love for Lily a beacon of light in the darkness. The deeper she went, the more treacherous the path became. The twisted trees seemed to come alive, their branches reaching out to ensnare her. The darkness closed in around her, threatening to consume her with each step. But Maria remained resolute, her love for her daughter stronger than her fear. In the heart of the forest, Maria found a small clearing where the darkness seemed to pulse and throb with malevolent intent. It was here that she would perform the ritual, a desperate gambit to save her child from the shadow people. As she recited the ancient words, the shadows writhed and twisted as if in pain. As the ritual reached its crescendo, a wave of light burst forth from Maria, illuminating the clearing and driving the shadows back. The whispers fell silent, and the darkness retreated, unable to withstand the power of a mother's love. Exhausted and battered, Maria emerged from the dark forest, the shadows vanquished and her daughter's soul reclaimed from their sinister grasp. As she held Lily close, she knew that the nightmares would not return, her love for her daughter having banished the darkness once and for all. But in the depths of the forest, the shadows still lingered, their whispers echoing through the trees like a haunting lullaby. And as the darkness bided its time, waiting for the next unsuspecting soul to venture into the woods, the shadow people would not soon forget the woman who had defied them, her love shining like a beacon in their dark domain. Whispers in the wind, the moon hung low in the sky as Brian, Sarah, Tom, and Emily stood at the edge of the notorious dark forest. They were a group of friends who had grown up hearing the legends of the shadow people, and their teenage bravado had finally convinced them to take on the ultimate dare. Armed with flashlights and a misguided sense of invincibility, they stepped into the dark abyss of twisted trees and foreboding shadows. As they ventured deeper into the woods, the wind picked up, sending a chill down their spines. The rustling leaves seemed to carry eerie whispers, each one more chilling than the last. "Did you hear that?" Sarah asked, her voice trembling. The others dismissed her fears, attributing the whispers to their overactive imaginations. But as they pressed on, they too began to hear the disembodied voices swirling around them, and the darkness grew more oppressive with each step. The shadows darker and more menacing. Tom, the group's self-appointed leader, tried to maintain his bravado, but the fear in his eyes betrayed him. The whispers were growing louder, more insistent, as if beckoning the friends to venture deeper into the heart of the forest. Unable to ignore the whispers any longer, Emily suggested they turn back. The others, now equally unnerved, quickly agreed, but as they attempted to retrace their steps, they found the once familiar path had vanished, replaced by a tangle of thorns and brambles that seemed to close in on them. As panic set in, the whispers intensified, the voices of the shadow people tormenting the friends with visions of their darkest fears. Brian, usually the stoic one, was the first to break down, claiming he saw his long-dead father lurking in the shadows. Sarah, her hands shaking uncontrollably, was convinced she heard her mother's voice calling out to her from the darkness. The shadows appeared to grow longer, reaching out for the terrified friends as they stumbled through the forest, their flashlights flickering and dimming with each passing moment. Emily, tears streaming down her face, felt a cold hand grip her shoulder and spun around, only to find no one there. In her panic, she tripped over a gnarled root, and her flashlight rolled away, casting eerie shadows that danced across the forest floor. As the friends huddled together, hopelessly lost and at the mercy of the shadow people, the whispers grew louder, drowning out their cries for help. The darkness closed in around them, and the shadows seemed to come alive, wrapping them in a chilling embrace. The sun rose the next morning, but the four friends were nowhere to be found. The only trace of their ill-fated journey into the dark forest was the muffled echo of their screams, forever woven into the whispers in the wind. Months had passed since the disappearance of Brian, Sarah, Tom, and Emily. The town was gripped by an uneasy silence, as if the very air was heavy with the weight of their loss. The dark forest, once a playground for daring teenagers, was now shunned by even the bravest souls, who feared the wrath of the shadow people. In the ensuing autumn, a stranger arrived in town. He was an enigmatic figure dressed in worn-out clothes and carrying a battered leather satchel. Introducing himself as Mr. Lewis, he claimed to be a paranormal investigator drawn to the town by the mysterious events surrounding the dark forest. Intrigued by the legend of the shadow people, he vowed to uncover the truth behind the friends' disappearance and bring them back, if possible. As Mr. Lewis delved into the town's history, he discovered that the shadow people were not just a myth. but a dark manifestation of the town's collective fears and regrets. Every person who had ventured into the forest never to return had unwittingly fed the darkness that now haunted the woods. He set out on a moonless night, entering the dark forest with nothing more than a lantern and his unwavering determination. The whine picked up as he ventured deeper, the whispers growing louder and more menacing, but Mr. Lewis remained steadfast, following the ritual's cryptic instructions and using his lantern to cast light upon the ever-encroaching shadows. As he neared the heart of the forest, the whispers grew deafening, and the shadows threatened to smother the light of his lantern. With his last ounce of strength, Mr. Lewis completed the ritual, and a blinding light erupted from the lantern, banishing the darkness and silencing the whispers. In the aftermath, the forest was transformed. The twisted trees straightened, and the oppressive atmosphere dissipated. The once menacing woods now seemed almost serene, bathed in the golden light of the rising sun. As Mr. Lewis stumbled back towards the edge of the forest, he found the four friends disoriented and weak, but alive. Brian, Sarah, Tom, and Emily were reunited with their families, but they could not remember the horrors they had faced in the forest. The memories of the shadow people and the whispers in the wind had been erased, replaced by a sense of relief and gratitude. As for Mr. Lewis, he disappeared as mysteriously as he had arrived, leaving behind only a tattered journal filled with accounts of his paranormal encounters. The town slowly returned to normal, the legend of the shadow people fading into a distant memory. But on certain dark, moonless nights, when the wind rustles through the trees, some still claim to hear the faintest echo of whispers in the wind, a chilling reminder of the darkness that once consumed the dark forest. This